How can you make your academic work accessible to people all around the world and outside of academia so that you have greater impact? That's what we're talking about in this video. Hi everyone, I'm Leigh from teachingacademia.com, and I'm all about giving you the tools you need to navigate academia to make your best impact. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you get notifications because I put out new videos each week. Today, we're going to be talking to Dr. Leigh Campbell, and I've had this great discussion with him about how you can make your work more accessible so that you reach a broader community outside academia and make a greater impact. Leigh's got some great tips for us on how you can do just that. So let's go check out what he has to say.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I have with us today Dr. Leigh Campbell. Leigh, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Hello, thanks.
Dr. Campbell is a lecturer in academic support at the University of the Arts in London. So we're so excited that you were able to join us all the way from London. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, it's great. It's a pleasure. Thanks.
And so we're going to be talking today about making your writing accessible to a wide range of people. So while it's important that other academics can read our work that's accessible to them and they understand it, there's a broader audience out there that we should be thinking about and thinking about how we engage with them. And they can also push us in how we think about our work as well. And so we're gonna dive into that. If you want to take it away, Leigh, I know you have some really good thoughts on this.
Okay, thanks. So in 2015, I had a student with vision impairment in my class. It was the first time that I had a student with a blind student in class, and I was giving this lecture. I was teaching fine art. I was giving this PowerPoint presentation, and the student put up his hand and said, "I can't see anything. I'm visually impaired." And at that point, I had this amazing realization that, my God, how visual my teaching was. But also that opened up this whole kind of inquiry for research about how visual fine art can actually be. And so that then made me think through my teaching about how my teaching then overlaps with issues within my own artistic research. So I've been conducting research for the last 3 years, looking at vision impairment and trying to use what I call performative pedagogies to try to increase public awareness of issues around blindness. I've been generating practical experiments via interactive workshops, and but engaging a lot of different professional groups. So not just those working within academia, but it's very, very important to reach to the group or the community, the blind community that I'm trying to improve their lives of. Through this research, one way that I can disseminate it is obviously through writing. Through academic forms of writing, so let's say in journal articles, but also it's really important to think about how do you get your research out to a wider audience. So I was lucky enough to publish an aspect of my research in the Journal for Pedagogic Development, and I was then approached by the Royal National Institute for Blind People to write a blog spot, just a casual 500-word blog, and I started writing it. And I sent it off to the editor, and she said, "It's great, but it's too academic. There's too much academic jargon. You need to make it more accessible." At the time, I was just coming out of the end of my PhD, and to be honest, I think my brain had been rewired to think in academic speak, and to think about, what are the conceptual, philosophical, theoretical frameworks underpinning my work. And I was trying to get all of that kind of language into this 500-word blog. But at that point, it really made me realise that I do need to make my writing accessible, but without patronising the audience as well. And actually, it was a real test of how I use language. And I really found with that, who's my audience? I had to really think about my intended audience, and that it was not people within academia. It may have been teachers, but it would have been the blind community themselves that wouldn't be au fait with that kind of language. So I really emphasised practical implementation, practical strategies that anybody could use or blind people could use to improve their lives. I was then invited by another organisation called Vocalise to do the same thing, and that was a moment where I really found my writing in terms of thinking about how you can still make it accessible, but without patronising. I also, beyond because I think very often when we do research, we want to, obviously disseminate it, and we want to share it. Just as another way of sharing it, I also like to use public dissemination events. And that's really good because I think you can engage, obviously beyond academia, but you don't know who your audience are. You could get, anybody, layman's. And again, you won't have time to really formulate an answer if somebody asks you a question and they really want to know, but just in quite simplistic terms. And I think it's a real skill to be able to share what you're doing, but without losing the essence of what it's made up of. So I think it's a real test and it's a real skill of being able to share your research, but doing it in an accessible but not patronising way.
So when you do public dissemination, so I can imagine somebody hear you say that and think that sounds really cool. That's really interesting. What are some ways that can look?
Okay, so for the visual impairment research, I organised a public discussion. It was basically a public discussion with people who'd taken part in a residency that I was fortunate enough to be invited to do in London a couple of years ago. And it was the residency participants, so that was blind people, sighted people, non-sighted persons, but also it was really important to get the general public to be aware of what we were doing. And in a way I quite like not being able to know who that audience were. Many of them were teachers because the workshop brought up a lot of different teaching strategies, but it was also because of the interest within performance, a lot of people within theatre and performance. So it's such a multidisciplinary cross-section of audience. And again, you don't always know what you're going to get. I think it's really important to make sure that there's plenty of time for reflection, plenty of time for question and answers from the audience, and also to point to where the research may go in the future, so people can keep in touch with you. I also think as well it's really important when you do research to gauge testimonials, focus groups, informal, because then you can gauge immediate impact and then impact over a period of time. And one thing I've noticed from this research is actually how that's formed genuine friendships with the people, the blind members of the blind community that I've been working with. So I think it's really, really important to develop those kinds of relationships and those kinds of, that kind of level of trust. It gives an authenticity to what you're doing.
Absolutely, and you want the general public to be aware of your research.
Yes.
You want obviously the communities that you do that work in to be aware of it, but then you want it to be broader than that, and that's the benefit of these public dissemination events, right?
Yes, I think, that's absolutely. I think one thing that I noticed at the public dissemination event was where somebody put their hand out to welcome one of the blind members of the audience, and they felt a little bit uncomfortable when that wasn't reciprocated, when the blind person didn't put their hand out to shake, because obviously they couldn't see that person. So I just think that when in academia, we don't always realise some of the wider implications of what we're doing. And actually that spoke on a very, very basic level of how we communicate with each other. So it can be these little things that actually are the real complex things that we just don't realise.
And then when you organize a public dissemination event, is this hosted, at your university? Do you go somewhere in the community to do it? What would you recommend people do? Because I think one of the things that tends to happen at universities is, we host talks.
Yeah, it gets very
really publicized outside the university, right? They're really just, bringing in other academics and students to listen to a scholar. And what you're doing, I think, is much bigger than that.
So I don't want it to actually be part of. Obviously, it's been kindly funded by the university and supported by my university, but a lot of my dissemination events do take place in public facing institutions. So, for example, in a community centre, in somewhere called Arts Admin in London, which hosts these informal discussion events. So it's trying to work out these kind of spaces that will allow for that kind of public debate to happen, which is so important and, like you're saying, crucial, that it's not within the insular bubble of academia.
Right. And I think, one of the things that you made me think of before we formally started our conversation here, when we were talking previously, is people will come in and they will ask you questions. And while, yes, they expect an answer, their questions can actually push you in ways that other academics are not, because they're going to bring a different perspective. So that's another benefit to this.
Yeah. I think also that we can be, which is great, we can be super engaged in what we're doing, but sometimes we can't always see the wood from the trees. And sometimes you just need somebody that just offers that quick kind of moment of reflection, just to say, well, actually, what am I doing? And actually sometimes to realise the value in what we're doing, because we can't always see what we're doing. And actually, how do you translate what you're doing very, very succinctly? I did have somebody say, so what are you doing, kind of like in one sentence. There's no way that I could sum it up, but actually, when you try to pare it down, it's actually really interesting to think, actually, what am I doing here, and where's the value?
Now, so let's say that I'm somebody that's not used to doing this. I don't typically share my work outside of academia, but I think that what you've said sounds really great. I want to get started. What might be an easy initial step so I don't feel so overwhelmed to getting started with something like this?
Okay, so it might be I suppose first of all to think about different conferences or different public discussions that may be happening beyond an academic environment, or maybe just like I did with the blind community, think about different locations that you could set up an event, a public discussion. It could be, like, for example, you might want to set something up online. It might be that you go to you might set up, like this, you might set up a Skype or some kind of online digital interface where you can. I think it's really important to gauge people from different professional backgrounds in your research, because I think the way that I've managed to rethink about the value of to reassert why I'm doing what I'm doing, is by testing out the research amongst different kinds of people. So not just academics, but scientists and politicians and people from very, very different disciplines, because then that helps to reaffirm why you're working within your discipline, and also to think beyond your discipline as well. That's really important.
And I think you could also, when you were giving that response, it made me think you could partner with another academic in your field who does similar research. You could partner with a prominent community member, right, to do a public dissemination event where there's 2 or 3 of you that are sharing information that's all connected in some way. And you talked about how you got invited to do a blog post. You don't have to start your own blog, but if you find some blogs that are good outlets for your work, you can contact and ask about, can I do a guest post for your blog? This is my idea. You may or may not get paid for it, and somebody might say yes.
Yeah, blogs are really good, aren't they? Because on the one hand, they're generally quite short, and they don't necessarily take that much time, but they're actually a really, really good quick fire way of getting your work out quite quickly. But again, you've also got to think about how accessible am I making this language as well. But a blog post is, even maybe just a tweet. I mean,
sharing your work on Twitter.
Even now with the extended, Twitter word count, you can fit quite a lot in those tweets. So just think about what you're doing. And, I've done that, and I've tested certain things out with tweets and think, I wonder what kind of response I'm going to get. And actually, it's quite surprising. And then that actually might then start to formulate something, which, who knows, might turn actually into a journal article or whatever.
Yeah, no, these are amazing, wonderful suggestions. So this is Dr. Leigh Campbell, and we've been talking about how to make your writing more accessible not just in academia, but beyond academia, so that, you know, your work makes maximum impact and reaches as many people as possible. So if you have questions, comments about how to do this, you can leave them in the comment section for this video. We will be happy to interact with you, respond to those questions, talk to you about, you know, the work that you're doing, how you're communicating it, generate some ideas, etc. And if you are doing this work and you're making it publicly accessible, how are you doing it? We would love to hear the ways that you're setting this up to engage with a bigger audience. So Leigh, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And good luck, everyone.